Welcome everyone to our Wednesday edition of our Packers News live chat alongside Jim Owczarski. I am Olivia Reiner. The Packers hit the practice field today as they gear up for Sunday night's matchup between the Packers and the Saints. We'll bring you the latest on why exactly the Packers have had such a hot start on offense. We'll also touch on Davante Adams' undisclosed hamstring injury in just a moment. However, as always, before we begin, I want to remind you, if you're over on social media, get those fingers going, everybody. We want to hear your questions. If you're over on Facebook, Periscope, or YouTube, leave us a question, leave us a comment, a thought that you're having in your mind. Let it all out. Jim and I will get to some of those toward the end of our conversation today. Jim, the Packers offense are off to a red-hot start. Just in 2 games, they have 85 points and 1,010 yards. That puts them at number 1 in both categories in the entire NFL. Last season, it was a vastly different story. At this time, through 2 games, last season, the Packers had 31 points and 548 yards. A totally different story. Why has the Packers offense had so much success through 2 games?
Yeah, it took 5-6 games to get to those numbers you just read off there, Olivia. I think it's 2 things. One, the Lions and the Vikings aren't very good, so the Packers took advantage of some issues in the secondary to really get their pass game going. But I know it's kind of cliche, I think, for at this point, I guess, for so many on the offense to say, oh, it's year 2, it's year 2. We understand things better. We expected it to be better. But I think really what's changed personnel-wise? It's Josiah DeGuara for Jimmy Graham, Rick Wagner / Elton Jenkins / Billy Turner for Brian Bulaga. It's the same guys. So I think we can't just dismiss them saying it's year 2, we get it. Because clearly through 2 games, they have gotten it. They've been able to adjust when the Vikings and the Lions switch things up defensively mid-game to try to stop, whether it be Davante Adams or Aaron Jones. I think it's really the combination of the whole offense understanding what they're supposed to do, but also Aaron Rodgers. Not to say that he wasn't bought in a year ago, Olivia, but I think we took for granted maybe how fast he could deconstruct 15 years of offense and reconstruct a brand new one and then somehow make that all work in a seamless fashion. I think the fact that the quarterback is far more comfortable with what they're doing and why they're doing it has a lot to do with this also.
A major part of this offense's success is wide receiver Davante Adams. In Week 1 against the Minnesota Vikings, he had 156 yards and 2 touchdowns. Week 2 against the Detroit Lions, it was a little bit of a different story. He sustained a hamstring injury about midway through the game, and he did not return. The bad news keeps piling up for Davante Adams, Jim. He did not practice in today's practice. How concerned are the Packers about the state of Davante's undisclosed hamstring injury?
Yeah, it's the soft tissue stuff is what's really difficult because it's, you could be feeling really good about it on Saturday, for instance, and then Sunday you go out and maybe it's in a warm-up or maybe it's on that second or third really hard cut or move up the field and it grabs again, and maybe you worsen it. So, he's not the kind of guy that has to practice, I don't think, to play. However, you want to make sure that's if he goes, it's not going to pull again to the point where now instead of maybe being a limited participant, he's become out for 4 weeks because it's there's a tear in there to some degree. So I think there has to be a little bit of concern just from the sheer purpose of how do we manage it, we being the Packers, how do you manage it so it doesn't become a bigger issue? As Matt LaFleur said, it's he keeps saying a marathon, not a sprint. Especially I think when you're dealing with hamstrings, it's safe to not sprint right away.
With and without wide receiver Davante Adams, the Packers offense has gotten to this point as they lead the league in yards. However, the Packers have left some yards out there. Head coach Matt LaFleur counted 6 drops from various receivers, tight ends, including tight end Jay Sternberger, tight end Robert Tonyan, and wide receiver Alan Lazard in Sunday's game against the Detroit Lions. How concerned are the Packers about those drops, Jim?
Well, it's one of those, I think, where they turn on the film and say, wow, that was a true mental error. The ones that they feel you can correct. I think sometimes when you're just physically beat by an opponent, you might be able to break it down and say, oh, technique could be better. But at the end of the day, that was a physical loss. I think the drops, look, they're probably just going to point to Marquez Valdez-Scantling in week 1. 2 terrible drops. Aaron Rodgers kept going to him, and we're not talking about that right now, are we? So I think going forward, they're going to keep throwing it to Jay Sternberger and all these other guys. And, it's part of it. And so I think what they hope is that it's not 6 or 7, it's 1 or 2. And I think that's a number most teams will live with.
Jim, let's pivot over to taking a look at the New Orleans Saints and the state of their offense right now. The Packers aren't the only ones down a star receiver. Wide receiver Michael Thomas of the Saints is also out. He's been dealing with an undisclosed hamstring injury. When he's healthy, Jim, he is a dangerous receiver. Last season, he led the league in receiving yards. How good is this Saints offense even without him?
Yeah, he's, I think there's sometimes a receiver can be considered the most valuable piece of an offense, and I think we're seeing that with the Saints right now, that when he's not there, it's not really about a deep threat with him. As I'm sure people are reading all over, Drew Brees, doesn't really push the ball down the field. He hasn't, not for some time. What it is it's catch and run. It's get it to Michael Thomas and let him do something with it, or Alvin Kamara, or whomever it may be. So that means they're hurting because he's not there. He requires extra set of eyes, 2, 3 players maybe. I don't know if anybody else deserves that on their offense. So now that allows the defense maybe to a degree to dictate where Sean Payton and Drew Brees normally dictate to them. But look, they still got Alvin Kamara. They're still scoring. They look good in week 1 before Thomas got hurt. I think that's the main concern for the Packers, is if the Saints decide to go power, and they say, you know what, let's run it first and kind of run everything off of Alvin Kamara in that run game, because I don't know yet if the Packers have shown us that they can stop that, if that's really a focus for the other team.
We'll keep you all posted as the week continues and we see whether or not Davante Adams and Michael Thomas return to practice for both the Packers and the Saints. All right, everybody, if you're over on Facebook, Periscope, and YouTube, you better be getting some questions in down there. It's not too late. If you haven't asked your question yet, make sure you get it in right now. Let's start with Jordan. Jordan says, do you think as the weather breaks, we see more of A.J. Dillon, running back for the Green Bay Packers, second-round pick? It's a crowded running backs room, Jim, with both running back Aaron Jones and Jamal Williams, the top 2 backs. And then, of course, there is A.J. Dillon. How much of a benefit is Dillon's lower body strength when it comes to dealing with what will be a very, very cold winter here in Green Bay?
Yeah, it's a fun thing to say. If John Madden were still doing games, I mean, it'd be a thing that he would, I'm sure, like to feature. Look, if A.J. Dillon gets carries, it's because of what the Packers do in the first 3 quarters. I mean, he had, 7 rushes against the Lions. It probably would have been about that number if they were able to stop the Vikings in week 1 in the 4th quarter. So if the Packers keep going up by 2-3 scores, I think he is going to get the ball, but it's not because it's colder. It's more because they're going to try to grind out the game and not have to put that wear and tear on Aaron Jones and Jamal Williams. Who knows, though? I mean, maybe a goal line carry if it's a home game and, -8. You send him in there and you just want to send a message and maybe have that opposing team kind of start to pack it up a little early. I could see that, but I think his carries will be dictated more by game flow than temperature.
He's getting a little bit more involved in the offense. We saw A.J. Dillon gets some snaps later in the game against the Detroit Lions. We'll see exactly how the Packers decide to use him, if they decide to use him at all, down in New Orleans. Thank you, Jordan, for your question. Let's take a question from Blake. Blake, it's great to see you. We love to see you. Blake asks, what does the Packers defense have to do to slow down Drew Brees? Through the first 2 games of the regular season, the Packers have had to face Vikings quarterback Kirk Cousins and Lions quarterback Matthew Stafford. What about Brees is different and special that Zadarius Smith and the entire outside linebackers group and all the other pass rushers of the Green Bay Packers defense are going to have to take notice of?
Yeah, I think for them, for the pass rush part of it, it's, man, how do I say this? So unlike a quarterback who could get out of the pocket and roll and be mobile and create kind of issues out of containment, Drew Brees isn't going anywhere. But what he does do is he slides around and moves around in that pocket, in that small space, in order A, to see, but also to give himself throwing lanes. So I don't know if that's rush discipline necessarily, if it's more just awareness or short area quickness, if that makes sense. I mean, if anything, maybe it's more, we see the effect of not having Kenny Clark, because he probably won't play in New Orleans, is can they get an immediate pushback on that offensive line so Drew Brees has nowhere to step up to? Because, look, if he's got to go back 7 yards and now all of a sudden there's nowhere for him to go, I mean, where's he going to go? His launch point, as they say, is going to change, and that's what the Packers want. They want that inaccuracy to be created. So I think that's the best way for them to contain him, if you will, is to just kind of compress that area of where he would be contained, if that makes sense.
It's going to be a busy day for all the outside linebackers. Preston and Zadarius Smith, Rashawn Gary. We'll see exactly how they decide to rush Mr. Drew Brees on Sunday. Thank you, Blake, for your question. Let's take a question here from Brian, another regular. Good to see you, Brian. Brian asks, is tight end Josiah DeGuara going to play this weekend? And what do we think of the new tight end Nakia Griffin-Stewart that the Packers just signed? Let's start with the first part of your question there with tight end Josiah DeGuara. DeGuara returned to practice today after dealing last week with both a shin and an ankle injury. We don't know exactly which leg that was that he was dealing with, the shin and the ankle injury. How likely is it, Jim, that DeGuara will be ready and available to play on Sunday?
Well, I'll definitely say the fact that he participated today, Wednesday, is a good sign. I mean, that was what happened last week. He didn't participate. It was like, oh, that's kind of a surprise. And then or he did, and then it was, an ankle pops up as part of that injury report, and he doesn't participate on that important Thursday padded practice. So, I mean, it's a good sign for sure that he's back out there, feels good enough to go. I mean, tomorrow, Thursday, is probably the biggest tell, if you will. But obviously it looks good. And in terms of Nakia Griffin-Stewart, he's an undrafted player out of Pitt. I mean, was a graduate transfer from Rutgers to Pitt last year. He's 6'5", 260, so he kind of fits the lean, long, tight end body type that this offense seems to fit. He played wide receiver in high school. Caught 19 passes for 180 yards and a score. So he didn't have a ton of great stats at Rutgers. He was, just kind of a guy as well. So I think this is more of an upside type of thing. Packers wanted to bring him in, see, if they can coach up some of the technical technical points, because clearly they see something physically in him that maybe they can develop.
Tight ends coach Justin Outen today said it's a little too early to be judging with Griffin-Stewart there. He's only got one practice under his belt. We'll see once he gets a little bit more acclimated to the offense and even just learns the offense. We'll see exactly how he fits into head coach Matt LaFleur's scheme. Thank you, Brian, for your question. Let's move over here to Zach. Zach says the New Orleans Saints are the worst against receiving tight ends. Do you think that tight end Robert Tonyan will be the key to the Packers' offensive success come Sunday? It's a good question. I'll refer exactly here to what Las Vegas Raiders tight end Darren Waller did to that New Orleans defense. He had 12 receptions, 103 yards, and one touchdown. He had a very productive day against the Saints yesterday. The Packers, quite frankly, don't have a Darren Waller on their roster. However, they do have tight ends that can do a lot of different things in the offense. How do you anticipate Coach Matt LaFleur using his tight ends against the Saints on Sunday?
Yeah, it's Darren Waller's a little different. The Raiders run their stuff differently. I mean, O.J. Howard in Tampa had 4 catches for 30 yards and a score. So, I mean, that's I guess if you're a fantasy player, the Saints aren't that great with those types of tight ends. I'm a little hesitant to just say any of these tight ends will be a key to anything. They have got a combined 4 catches. It was a nice touchdown grab for Tanyan. He was in the right spot when he needed to be. But, as Aaron Rodgers said, the first look was the receiver. So we'll see. I mean, Matt LaFleur has proven that he's not afraid to change a game plan or create a game plan for someone or some position. But I don't – I guess I don't know if I'm ready to just say, yes, the tight ends are it. This is the game. I'm more inclined to believe they're going to run the ball, especially if Davante Adams is a play. They're going to do a lot of play action, and maybe the tight ends then benefit from some of that stuff that we saw on Lazard and Valdez-Scantling benefit from, when Adams went out on Sunday.
Thank you, Zach, for your question. Let's take it back to Jordan. Jordan, thank you for all your great questions today. Jordan asks, do you think head coach Matt LaFleur is setting teams up with all the motions and the fakes pre-snap, starting to give wide receiver / running back / return specialist Tyler Ervin the ball on some of these later in the year? Tyler Ervin was a little bit more involved in the offense week 1 against the Minnesota Vikings. He had 3 carries for 38 yards and a reception for 6 yards. This past week against the Detroit Lions, he only had 1 reception. However, he was used in some of those motions pre-snap that head coach Matt LaFleur likes to use. At what point do we see some of those handoffs starting to go to Ervin a little bit more?
Yeah, I think we'll see it. I mean, this is one of those where it's, I think, purely on Aaron Rodgers to make that read, whether it be the jet sweep handoff that we saw in Minnesota or, specifically there was one play, the Lions defended it really well. I mean, Ervin came across, he did an orbit motion behind, and that was the first look. But Rodgers saw that, hey, that was covered up, and he just kind of dirted it to Josiah DeGuara on the other side. What I think teams are counting on, or what the Packers are counting on at some point, is someone makes a mistake when Tyler Ervin is doing all that stuff, where they just decide, he has never gotten the ball there, so they're not going to give it to him, or that he stops paying attention, and boom, that's where it happens. So, yeah, Jordan, I do think we'll see Tyler Ervin get the ball in one of those scenarios, but to say when, I'm not sure, because I think that's purely based on what the quarterback sees.
Thanks, Jordan, once again for your question. Let's take a question here from Natashin. Good evening, Packers family. Good evening to you as well. If it is evening, perhaps it's morning somewhere for some of you. Wherever you are, hope it's a good one. Question, why is paying running back Aaron Jones even a question at this point? He's definitely proven he's an elite player. Certainly not a question whether or not Aaron Jones is an elite player. It's almost just about proving 236 all-purpose yards in Sunday's game against the Detroit Lions. I think that would qualify him as an elite player at this point. Why is paying Aaron Jones even a question at this point? Well, the Packers have a lengthy list of 2021 free agents that they have to keep in mind, including left tackle David Bakhtiari, center Corey Linsley, cornerback Kevin King, even other running back Jamal Williams. All of those players are eligible to be extended after this season. They're eligible to sign extensions right now if their agents are able to get that done. However, the Packers understand that they have limited cap space to play with next season. The cap is going to be $175 million at the bare minimum next season because of the nature of the coronavirus and the way that it's impacted revenue. It's going to impact revenue for the rest of the season. The Packers have about $8.5 million in cap space this year. If they don't use it this year, it would roll over to next season. Jim, with all those crazy numbers in mind, why haven't General Manager Brian Gutekunst and cap specialist Russ Ball, why haven't they offered Aaron Jones a contract extension just yet this season?
Yeah, I think it has just a lot to do with what you said. David Bakhtiari is number one. I mean, I don't know right now what Laremy Tunsil's total deal was, but David Bakhtiari is going to want more than that. We could argue that he probably deserves it and has earned it. So if that's the case, you're talking $20 million a year for your left tackle. So you kind of have to have that room and then maybe work off of that. And I don't know what that is. Now I know Bakhtiari has said, look, other teams can afford guys, other teams can sign everybody, and that's true. The Packers have really never been the other teams in that way. Jones, I think it's one of those weird things where I think the team would gladly take him back, extend him, but it would almost have to be purely on their financial terms. And I don't know what that is. I mean, they rarely sign running backs to a second contract. Aaron Jones, by all rights, should be saying, hey, I want $10 to $15 million annually, like these other running backs in my class. And the Packers may agree with him, but then they may say, well, we can't afford that because of these other things we need to do. So it's it's a difficult balance to strike, and it's hard to say why, other than to say, well, not everyone can be signed, and it just takes a little bit of finagling.
Certainly tough there for general manager Brian Gutekunst to be making those decisions. However, if you're running back Aaron Jones, you're looking around at the rest of the 2017 running backs draft class that has already been signed, like counterpart running back in Minnesota, Dalvin Cook, who just recently got extended. You're wondering, hey, where is my money? Run me my money. That's what Aaron Jones is thinking right now. We'll see if he ends up getting it. Thank you, Natasha. Appreciate your question. Let's take a question here from Tommy. Tommy would like to see a little bit more wide receiver Robert Foster. Why not? Hey, practice squad players can get called up to the 55-man roster for game day. It's possible that he could get called up. Any of those practice squad players can be eligible to be called up unless you're tight end John Lovett, who has already had his 2 call-ups this season. If the Packers would like to bring him back to the active roster for game day, they're going to actually have to sign him to the 53-man roster. However, I digress. What could Robert Foster, who the Packers signed off the Bills roster when they were initially assembling their roster, their initial 53-man roster, and they let former Packers wide receiver Jake Kumerow go to the Buffalo Bills, what do the Packers have in Robert Foster potentially?
Yeah, from what I've read about him and looked at, he is a deep threat. He's averages 20 yards a catch, and he's got a few years of experience. You'd think that in terms of just getting a handle on the playbook and being able to do certain things that he'll be able to do that. He's not a rookie. Now that said, it makes you wonder if like a Darius Shepard or Reggie Begelton might get called up, if you will, if Adams can't go. And Equinemius St. Brown being on IR. And the reason I bring those guys up, especially Shepard, had a good camp, and obviously year 2 in the offense, he's going to know where to go and what to do. Aaron Rodgers has thrown to him before. But yeah, Robert Foster, I think everything I've read about him is a big, deep play threat. And that it could be interesting because for as good as Davante Adams is, that's not how they use him. So if like Foster, Valdez-Scantling were opposite sides, that really presents an interesting, conundrum for a safety because both of those are like 4-3, 4-4 guys that can really run.
Although players like wide receivers Darius Shepard, Reggie Begelton might be ahead of Foster in the depth chart, never say never. We'll see exactly if perhaps one day the Packers are interested in either signing him to the 53 or bringing him up as one of those 55 practice squad elevation players. Thank you very much, Tommy, for your question. Ooh, I've got a fun, creative question here from Brian. I love both fun and creativity. What's the chance that the Packers use a running back set? Aaron Jones, Jamal Williams, and Tyler Ervin. In what universe would the Packers want why do I keep calling them tight ends? 3 running backs. And Tyler Ervin, I suppose, is a running back, a receiver. He does a little bit of everything. In what universe would the Packers want all 3 of those players on the field?
Well, actually, have they been on the field together yet, Olivia? I know, at least combinations of 2 of them have been. Because, Tyler Ervin essentially has been the 5th wide receiver, lining up in the slot. And I think he's been in the backfield a couple times. definitely motioning out. I would definitely imagine that Matt LaFleur's got a package in there where Jones, Ervin, and Williams are all in there, because through 2 games, we've already seen all 3 split out wide. We've seen them all targeted as a receiver, if you will, running routes. So no, I don't think, Brian, it's all that out of the realm of possibility to see. We might see a Sunday, if especially if Adams is not going to be able to go, and if there's a setback, which is Saya DeGuara. It's all about putting playmakers and creating mismatches. So what would be interesting is how they line up. I mean, do you do like an I formation with Jamal Williams and Aaron Jones? You put them both off the hip of Rodgers and Tyler Ervin sort of in the slot. I mean, that could really create some different issues and matchup problems.
I'll even go as far as to say, let's put Aaron Jones, let's split him out as a receiver. Let's get A.J. Dillon, put him in the I formation. Then you'll have 4 running backs on the field at once. Why not? It'll be a lot of fun. That's what this is all about, right? Thank you, Brian, for your question. That is going to do it for us today, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll be back tomorrow to take another live stream with you all and take some of your questions once again. In the meantime, check out PackersNews.com for all of your coverage. Follow us on all of our social media platforms. We'll have lots of updates for you throughout the week, especially as it relates to injuries, especially a certain wide receiver, Davante Adams. You're going to want to make sure you're checking out our social media channels every single day. For Jim, I'm Olivia. We'll see you next time.